The storm rolled in the morning, I said, I do. A sheet of pewter rain that smeared the courthouse windows until all I could see were moving shadows. A judge's mouth, a silver band, and the stranger whose hand swallowed mine as if he'd been holding it for years. I said yes because saying no felt dangerous, and when we stepped back into the coastal wind, he leaned close and murmured, Elena, keep your head down, in a voice that sounded like a promise and a warning braided together. The truth was I didn't remember agreeing to marry him, didn't remember arriving in Bracken Point, Maine, didn't remember the last 24 hours except in flashes. Water, a siren, a hand at the small of my back, and the only thing sharper than the cold was the sense that someone I couldn't name wanted me dead. He drove us north along a road that disintegrated into mist until the world changed to rock and scrub, and an old lighthouse perched like a bone on the cliff's edge, its glass eye clouded, its iron steps spiraling upward like a secret. And when he said, home for now, I almost laughed. Because home is a memory and mine felt borrowed. He said his name was Daniel Reed, a marine architect who consulted on wreckage, and while he made coffee in a kitchen that remembered men with rope-burned hands, I wandered the curved corridor counting paces and details. 2 mugs, a wool blanket, a hidden drawer with a gun I did not touch, a framed map with a pin stuck in the sea. That first night, the wind pressed the lighthouse so hard the panes groaned, and I woke to his shadow moving past my door, to a whisper I wasn't meant to hear. Anna, soft as a confession and sharp as a blade. In the morning, I pretended the name meant nothing and watched him repair a cracked lantern while gulls knifed the air. And around noon, when a car idled without lights at the bottom of the cliff path, I watched him go still in a way that didn't belong to a man who fixed boats. The knock came in 3 measured taps, and when Daniel opened the door, a clean-cut man in a rain slicker held up a badge that flashed like a fish in sun. Detective Hale, state liaison checking on the relocation couple, he said, and the word couple caught in my throat like a lie too large to swallow. All good, Daniel said, blocking the doorway with his shoulders, and Hale's gaze slid past him to me with careful concern. Ma'am, are you safe? He asked, voice pitched to sound like help. And I wanted to say I didn't know, that my name might be Elena on paper and something else in the dark. But Daniel's hand tightened at his side. Nothing on his face, a statue guarding something breakable. That night the generator hiccuped and died and we lit candles, the kind that make every wall a stage, and I asked in a voice that wasn't brave, why did he come? Routine, Daniel said, which was not an answer, and as he turned away the candle caught his eyes and made them a color I couldn't name. I slept badly, dreamed the sea had a mouth and whispered, Anna, Anna, Anna. The next morning I found a trap door under the spiral steps where sand always collected, and tucked inside a tin were matches, a compass, and a passport with my face and another name, Anna Larkin. My heart did something reckless in my chest as I climbed the tower to where Daniel was tightening a storm brace, the ocean breathing gray behind him. Who am I? I asked, the passport between my fingers like proof of a betrayal I hadn't yet earned. He closed his eyes for 1 slow second, then said, You were Anna, in a tone that sounded like a memory he hadn't forgiven. And when I asked, Then who is Elena? He answered, She's who you are now until it's over. And the word over was another word for alive. We were put here for your safety, he added, but the we bent oddly in his mouth. And as I stared past him at the line where sky pressed into sea, I felt subtext move under the surface like a creature changing depth. I didn't know what to ask next, so I asked about the ring. Thin gold that felt light as thread, and he said, Paper leaves holes, marriage closes some of them. And even though logic bristled, a smaller, quieter part of me recognized the care in a plan that solved practical problems while stealing vows. For days we practiced a routine that looked like marriage if you squinted. He taught me the lighthouse stairs with my eyes closed in case we had to move fast in the dark. I made lists from the pantry and learned how to anchor pots on the stove so a gust wouldn't send them flying. We bent around each other in the smallness like people who knew what the other would reach for on a shelf. When I asked where he went at dawn, he said the harbor. And when I asked which one, he said the only one with a good pie. And I didn't say that details matter because details save you. The first red herring arrived with a rumor. At the tiny dock store, the clerk, a woman with wind-burned cheeks, lowered her voice as if the fog might tattle. You watch yourself with that man, she said, glancing toward the lighthouse. He's been seen with men who aren't fishermen. And the way she said it made it sound like a sin. I carried the rumor back like a stray and fed it until it grew teeth. The second red herring came in the form of a key. A small brass thing I found taped under the kitchen drawer, cold against my palm, labeled with a number I recognized from the harbor lockers. When I tried it the next morning, heart banging, the locker swung open to reveal a waterproof duffel with a burner phone, a stack of cash, and a file folder full of clipped articles about a corporation called Navicore Maritime and a death at sea labeled accident. I stared at the headline photo of a young woman with tired eyes, Anna Larkin, Navicore compliance analyst, blows whistle, and my stomach turned in a slow, dangerous wave. At the lighthouse, I set the folder on the table like a dare. Daniel came in, saw the open locker key, the money, the newsprint, and my face, and I watched the walls he carried collapse just enough to see the man inside. "You knew," I said, voice low, and he said, "I was there," which meant more than it sounded like. In the silence between us, the sea smashed itself to pieces and reassembled. "You testified," Daniel said, not asking, eyes on the headline. "You exposed the cover-ups, the bribed inspectors, the forged hull certificates." And as he recited my sins, the missing pieces arranged themselves into a single hard shape. At Navicore, I had reported doctored maintenance logs that put crews at risk. And when the wrong barge broke apart in a storm, an intern drowned. My testimony had put a vice president under indictment and sent a procurement manager on the run. The night before my memories went jagged, I had seen a reflection in my apartment window that wasn't mine. The elevator had stopped between floors. The fire alarm had tested the building's nerves for 8 minutes. "You were moved," Daniel said. "Married to conceal your identity further. Because spousal privilege blocks certain subpoenas, and because a married woman on a cliff looks like a ghost of a town, not like a target, and I didn't know whether to be grateful or furious." "And you?" I asked, the question a small blade. "What are you?" And he said after a beat, "U.S. Marshal Service, detailed to the Maine district." And then softer, a complicated truth. "And the man who failed you once," which made something old and bright skitter through my ribs. That night, while wind prowled the galleries, our generator coughed and died, and the lighthouse became a throat for a dozen different sounds. We moved in a pattern that felt practiced. He blocked the back entrance. I secured the hatch. He handed me the radio to call in a storm code that meant stay clear, and even wrapped in fear, I felt a thin thread of intimacy tie itself from one moment to the next. Near midnight, Hale came again, his badge shining like an invitation, his voice pitched carefully. "We need to get her to a safe house." And I watched Daniel pick the lie apart with his eyes but ignore it. Because here was the midpoint, and midpoint demands a choice. "Let me get my coat," I said. And as I passed behind Hale, I caught the smell of a cologne I remembered from the locker folder. Navicore's holiday gala photo had a caption describing their VP of Security's signature aftershave. I tucked the memory away and said nothing. In the truck, Hale's questions were soft-like. Had I remembered anything new? Did Daniel leave me alone often? Did I think he was trustworthy? And somewhere inside me, a locked door swung inward. "Stop," I said suddenly when the road bent the wrong way. Hale's hand slid to the console where a weapon wasn't quite hidden. "We're taking a different route," he said, but the tires felt like they were choosing gravel, not asphalt. And beyond the glass, I saw only trees pressed close. I reached for the door handle. "Don't," he said, and the kindness fell clean off his voice. "I've been paid more than you're worth to deliver you," he added conversationally, and I had just enough time to feel stupid for ignoring every warning before the headlights behind us cut the night like shears. Daniel's truck surged into view, engine howling, and Hale swore, jerking the wheel. He took the logging road, and the world turned into mud and pine and light strobing through branches. I did the only thing I could. I cracked the door and rolled, hitting the ditch so hard my lungs forgot how to breathe. The world went black for a second and returned in pieces. Rain, the smell of earth, the crunch of boots. A hand caught my arm and dragged. "On your feet," Daniel said, voice a low order I felt my body obey before my brain caught up. We dove between trees as Hale fired, bark exploding into the air like sharpened confetti. Something hot grazed my calf. Daniel shoved me behind a boulder and returned fire. The night shrank to breath and thunder and the way his shoulder squared, as if he could keep a universe out by standing correctly. The shootout ended when the distant wail of sirens threaded through the rain. Daniel's radio had sung to someone while we ran, and Hale vanished into the trees with a parting shot that took Daniel's hat clean off. Back at the lighthouse, wrapped in blankets, my hands wouldn't stop shaking, an aftershock that made the mug rattle on the saucer. You married me to close holes, I said, trying to make a joke and failing. I married you because the forms asked for a spouse and I couldn't picture the signature belonging to anyone else, he answered before he could stop himself, and the room changed shape around those words. I thought then catastrophically of his night whispers, Anna, and the taste of my own name in his mouth, and when I asked how he had failed me, he looked at the lantern, the stairs, the wet boots by the door anywhere but at me. 3 years ago, he said, slow, I was assigned to protect a witness in Port Clyde, a whistleblower who had made enemies without meaning to, and his hands flexed once as if remembering a gun that wasn't there. I missed a tail that night, and the witness left the safe house to feed a stray cat. The men who wanted to put her in the ground were fast, and the only reason she isn't there is because their car wouldn't start. I never forgot the sound of her voice when she called it in, and my chest went tight in an entirely new way. What was her name? I asked, but I already knew, because memory is a tide. It goes out and takes what you love and comes back with pieces in your pockets. Anna, he said, and even the ocean seemed to hold its breath. The dark night of the soul sneaks up wearing familiar clothes. Ours wore rain and distance. For 2 days, we didn't speak except in logistics. Flares, fuel, weather reports. Both of us too careful and too raw. I replayed every moment looking for proof that I had chosen the wrong stranger and found only small, ordinary mercies. His habit of sliding the knife away from me on the cutting board. His unthinking reach for the top shelf while handing me the mug. At dawn on the 3rd day, I woke to the smell of smoke and a hiss that wasn't sea. I stumbled to the gallery and saw the car at the base of the cliff on fire, the flames swallowing the hood, the heat making the rain steam. On the glass, a message had been fingered in the salt at eye level. You talk, you die. We packed in 8 minutes what we could carry, cash, radio, duffels, and climbed down the service path hand over hand into a fog that made the world a smaller, more dangerous place. The safe house in town had a code name, Heron, and a fireplace that didn't draw. We arrived through a back alley, and the way the hairs lifted on my arms before the door even opened should have been warning. Inside the room that smelled of lemon oil and government paint, Hale was waiting with 2 other men who looked like they knew how to make a hurricane apologize. Took you long enough, he said, and then smiled, and in that moment the fair play clues assembled. The wrong badge font I had clocked but not labeled. The cologne from the gala. The fact that only a handful of people knew the lighthouse coordinates. The message on the glass meant for my eyes alone. You're late to your own betrayal, I said, my voice steadier than my blood, and he laughed and showed me what was under the smile. A gun, no hurry. You're going to recant, he said, or someone else is going to write a very moving posthumous letter for you. And when he motioned Daniel forward with the muzzle, my body did what love and terror make it do, moved. I stepped between the gun and Daniel without thinking, and his breath broke on my neck. No, he said, terrible and soft, and he reached for my wrist, his grip a plea. Let her go, Hale said, and something reckless inside me, maybe the same thing that made me tell the truth at Navicore, lifted its head. You want me, I said to Hale, 1 inch at a time stealing the direction of the encounter, because I can undo what I did, and I let him believe it. I looked up at Daniel and said the words that would cut our last rope. He's right. If I recant, they stop coming. And I watched Daniel take that blade, hold it, refuse to let it cut. Over my dead body, he said, and Hale's mouth twitched as if to say that could be arranged. The room smelled like talc and metal. Outside, a seagull laughed as if the world were a simple place. In the corner, a red light on the old wall phone blinked, a detail that didn't belong in a safe house without active landlines. And listening is a kind of bravery. I swallowed and said, fine, I'll do it. And Hale, who thought menace was a leash, eased the muzzle a fraction. I moved toward the desk where a laptop waited, and when I reached for the chair, my fingers brushed the phone, knocking it off the cradle with a clatter that made everyone flinch. Clumsy, I murmured, writing it. And when I did, I depressed the page button built into the cradle, a little plastic nub no one designs into modern phones, but the Marshals do for ghosts and heroes. Somewhere in town, a transmitter woke up. I sat, opened the laptop, and typed what Hale wanted to see while beneath the desk, my foot nudged a power strip, drawing the eye of a man whose job it was to notice small things. Don't try it, he said, and I didn't. Instead, I bought us seconds with sentences. How do you want it framed? I asked, and he obliged me with details, the vanity of a man who wants to be important enough to have edited the truth. While he talked, Daniel slid his hand into mine under the lip of the desk, the smallest connection in a room full of catastrophe, and in that anchor, I found the courage to ruin the plan of a dangerous man. "There," I said, and turned the screen toward him. He leaned in to read, lowering the gun, and Daniel moved, fast as forgiveness. The shot cracked the air like a branch in a blizzard. Hail fired wild as he fell. Pain lit my shoulder with a white-hot star, and I hit the floor behind the desk, tasting the copper of adrenaline, and above me I heard Daniel's voice through teeth. "Stay with me." And the part of me that wanted to leave my body said not yet. The door exploded inward under a boot, and men with uniforms that matched Daniel's training flooded the room in a choreographed thunder. It was over in less time than it takes to say the word afterward, but time is elastic when you think you've lost the thing that found you. I woke in a hospital where the monitors gossip and the windows pretend they're pictures. Daniel was in the chair, asleep badly, like a man who has been guarding a border for days. I watched his breath stutter every fourth inhale, a tic I recognized from the lighthouse nights. And when he woke and saw my eyes, he said, "Raw, don't do that again." And I said, "Which part?" And he said, "All of it," and then ruined his command with a hand on my hair, careful as prayer. Recovery was a season, not a moment. We hid in boring places and let time do the things stories never let it. We waited. We made tea in kitchens that smelled like other people's lives and walked at dawn in neighborhoods where no one knew we were borrowed. He taught me how to spot a second car in a mirror, while I taught him that sometimes the best way to disappear is to be exactly where you're expected. I testified again, this time with men who wouldn't sell me, and I said the truth out loud in a voice that shook like a tree and did not break. The verdicts didn't fix what the sea had swallowed, but they nailed down enough boards to make a dock. A year later, when the case files became archives and my name became less interesting, we returned to the lighthouse to pay our debt to the stairs that taught us to run in the dark. He stood where the gallery glass makes the world look like a coin and said, without a speech, "I married you to close holes." And I laughed because we had earned the joke. And then he went quiet, and the wind carried the gulls away so the day had room for the next words.
"Would you like to marry me for real, Anna?"
My heart did the thing it used to do when a storm hit, tighten, drop, rise, because names are powerful, and he had given me mine back in a way that felt like safety, not erasure. "Only if you ask my permission to use my kitchen," I said, which was our way of saying yes to the rest of a life. And he folded against me in a kiss that felt like a lighthouse light sweeping a black sea. Proof and promise. We married beneath the Fresnel lens, while the keeper we borrowed for the day cried harder than anyone. Our vows were shorter than our last grocery list. Keep me honest, keep me safe, keep laughing, and when the ring slid home, the world steadied. After the toast and the chowder and the photo that made us look like we'd been carved from the same quiet rock, we climbed the steps in our socks and listened to the building breathe. At midnight, I woke to the sound of rain and the thought that had started it all. I had married a stranger. I looked across the quilt at the man whose past knew my real name and realized the stranger had a history with me longer than either of us had admitted. That he had been in the margins of my case file and the echo of the phone line and the corner of the room where the danger couldn't quite get. That he had said yes to a job and found a vow. "What?" he asked, sleep bird, catching me staring. "Nothing," I said. And then, because the dark is the right place for certain truths, everything. And he pulled me in like someone who had been practicing that motion since the first time he had whispered Anna into a night he thought was empty. Outside, the ocean kept doing what it does, arriving, receding, tirelessly remaking the shore. And inside, so did we.